This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
This week in the NHL is absolutely bananas. We got the draft, we got everything, we got the end of the playoffs, and we also got NHL free agency to top it all up. And thankfully, we're in store for a great free agency, honestly, especially if you're looking for top D, top forwards. There are a ton of options in this free agency window that, to me, could really boost your team. We're already starting to see a lot of teams, Cough, Detroit, that are trying to make big moves to bring in cap space to bring in some of these guys. So I thought, why not? Today, let's go through all of the top free agents in every single position, goaltending, defense, and forwards to see who your team could end up signing and ultimately where I think they'll end up going. So make sure you watch till the end as we go through all the free agency predictions and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now we're going to start out easy today and go on to the goaltending. And by far, this is the weakest position in this year's free agency. There are not a lot of options, especially if you're looking for starter quality guys. I'm sorry. Starting us out as maybe the best goaltender of the class is Elias Samsonov. I know that it shows that this isn't the greatest class in the world for goaltending. I still think Samsonov can be better than he was last year. It was an injury-riddled season, inconsistencies. I don't think he's at the 919 level he was back in 2023, but I still think he could be a decent middle fringe goaltender. Not somebody that's going to be perfect for you, but still somebody that will probably hover around a 905 save percentage. In saying that, though, I think he will end up signing with the San Jose Sharks. That's a team that has been able to bring in a lot of reclamation projects recently in the goaltending side, and I think Samsonov just needs a fresh start somewhere where he can get some playing time. And alongside Blackwood, those guys could easily be a tandem goaltending pair and be pretty decent. I don't think Samsonov is going to be brilliant, but I think in San Jose you could kind of jumpstart your career a little bit, and hopefully the defense isn't as horrible as it was last year. Going on to maybe one of the best backup goalies in the NHL, though, in Laurent Brossoit, somebody that with the best starting goaltender ahead of him, he's able to put up great numbers as a backup, and in that limited playing time, he's always put up great numbers. This last year, a 927 save percentage in 23 games with Winnipeg. He was huge there, alongside Hellebuck having a great season too. To me, the team that makes the most sense, though, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. You got Joseph Woll already there, and he's likely to be the starter, not as much as Hellebuck is right now, but I do think he'd be able to play the bulk of games. Brossoit might get a little bit more responsibility. Maybe that's something he wants to go after. Maybe he wants to get more playing time, and I think in Toronto, he could get a lot more games than he's used to, probably more like 30, 35, and I think for him, especially to get that extra bit of responsibility, I think it would be pretty huge, and I think the Leafs will be able to give it to him. Now, that is actually it for the goaltenders that I think are going to make a massive difference for your team, but now let's go on to the defensemen. But before we do that, let's talk about today's sponsor in BetUS. Just recently, we saw BetUS come out with their 2025 Stanley Cup winner odds, and there's some pretty interesting ones. You got the top tier, which might not be all too surprising, at plus 900 being Florida, Edmonton, and Carolina, but then you have some interesting ones. You got the Stars at plus 1100. I think that's pretty good value. You got the New Jersey Devils, who I think are going to be rebounding in a major way next year as a cup contender at plus 2200. You got a couple really interesting picks here, but honestly, I think the Stars one is absolutely the best value. No bias there. So I'm going to put $5 down on a future bet to win 55, and we'll see how it goes. But every time you guys sign up to BetUS, it helps the channel a ton. So link in the description, and thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. But now we move on to the defensive free agents, and then we go into one of the best and Stanley Cup champion now of the Florida Panthers in Brandon Montour, and wherever he ends up going, he is going to get a massive payday just for the offense that he's provided over the last few years. A consistent guy and just how good he's been. Now, he did have a little bit of a decline this year, but that was due to some playing time issues and just some consistency issues there too. But a year ago, he got 73 points, 16 goals in 80 games, and I think that's really going to raise the value there. I do think, though, the team that makes the most sense to actually sign him in the end is still the Florida Panthers. Without him, they don't have a lot of offense on that defense, and even though they have a few other key free agents, honestly, I think Montour is going to be their number one priority, and they're going to get it done in the end. Then we go on to a bunch of Carolina Hurricanes defensemen, and we're going to start it with Brett Pesce. This one, to me, is pretty easy. We've heard a lot of interest about the Devils, potentially maybe even trading for his rights, but even if they don't, I think Pesce makes a lot of sense there, especially if the Devils are going to trade a Marino or a Siegenthaler this year. I think their defense is going to look quite a bit different next season. Brett Pesce would be an excellent puck-moving addition, though, and he makes the most sense to me. He's somebody that, especially in the Devils system with the puck-carrying possession game they have, would fit Pesce's game beautifully. Then we keep going and go on to Shawn Walker, who of course was a pretty big rental last year for the Colorado Avalanche. He was never really in the plan to keep him. I don't expect that to happen, but he's somebody that had a great season last year with both Philly and the Avs playing bigger minutes and proving himself as a capable two-way puck-moving D. To me, the team that makes the most sense is the San Jose Sharks. I think Walker's going to want a big payday, and I don't think there's going to be a ton of teams out there that will actually have the ability to give him what he wants. In San Jose, though, especially if they are going to trade Ferraro, their defense is going to look quite a bit different, and they will need to make additions. They, of course, already went out and got Jake Wellman, which I think is one big one, but I think Walker will be the second. Now, going on to one of the more interesting free agents in Oliver Ekman-Larsson, to me, this really all depends on Florida's game plan. Do they re-sign Reinhart? And if they do, I think that really affects if they're able to re-sign Montour and re-sign really a bulk of their defense. But I do think Florida, and I just have a feeling about this, is going to prioritize that defense, trying to bring back as much of it as humanly possible. And it's a reason why they were so successful these past couple of years. I think Montour's going to be re-signed, and I also think Oliver Ekman-Larsson is going to be re-signed. He's somebody that had a great year of Florida after being bought out by Vancouver, won the Stanley Cup, was a huge part of the team. Why not? I think for both parties, staying in Florida is the best thing for it. Going on to a D that will not be staying, though. Next up, I got Brady Shay, somebody that I think is all but guaranteed to be a Detroit Red Wing. We already saw the Steve Yzerman trade a top lefty in Jake Wellman. I think they're opening up space, and I could absolutely see, like Pesce and the Devils, the Red Wings going out, trading for Shay's rights and getting a deal done very quickly. As a puck-moving D, he had a great season last year, 47 points, 13 goals, and 80 games. And I think for Detroit, they're looking to change up almost an entire defense. Signing Skjei, though, would be a big step forward for that. But then we go on to more of the defensemen here, starting with Nikita Zadorov. He's somebody that I think will be a really interesting free agent this year. He was fantastic for Vancouver down the stretch once he was traded there, and especially in the playoffs, he was a complete beast, which will obviously raise his value a ton. A team that makes a lot of sense to me, though, is the Ottawa Senators, especially if we're going to see a Jacob Chikrin trade, and especially if that's just a cap dump for a couple of picks. It opens up quite a bit of space, and I think Zadorov on that left side could be a big boost for the Sens as a defenseman, physical guy. We know what Zadorov brings, and I think the Sens will definitely be interested. And he doesn't really seem like the type of player to have much of a problem playing in Canada, which is a nice bonus. Next up on to, in my opinion, the best defenseman of the crop in Chris Tanev, somebody that I loved having as a Dallas Star in the regular season, the playoffs. He was just such a defensive beast and such a big part of that defense. Unfortunately, I don't see us being able to actually keep him. We did have the Ryan Suter buyout, which might make things interesting, but I still think he ultimately leaves. And to me, the Leafs just make so much sense with what they wanted, what they've tried to acquire. Brad Treliving, we know his experience and his history of Chris Tanev as well, signing him as well in Calgary. I think he's going to want him back in Toronto, and I think it's just going to happen somehow, some way. But now we move on to the top forwards of this free agency class, and right up near the top is Steven Stamkos. In terms of actual interest, he's definitely up there. With how we've heard him in Tampa Bay's camp haven't been making too much progress in negotiation. The door is wide open for him to potentially leave in free agency, which doesn't feel real, but it is a possibility. We know the player he can be. We know the offense he can provide. I mean, he's just been a ridiculous monster all throughout his time in Tampa Bay, at least when he's been healthy. We know what he can do. But to me, with Steve Yzerman making all this cap room, making all these big moves to shed salary, and especially with how active he's been in free agencies before, I think he's going to be active again. And honestly, out of anybody, I think the Detroit Red Wings are going to be the team to sign him. I mean, you can have him on the right wing, you can have him as a center, you can have him as that diversifying profile. We know Yzerman's history as well with Stamkos, and I think that'll go a long way. I think if he goes anywhere else, Detroit makes the most sense. Now, we mentioned Sam Reinhart a lot today, but not about where he could go until now. We're going to talk about it finally. And like I said before, with Florida, I think going in a different direction, focusing on re-signing their D, and also maybe for saving graces on the forward group like Jeff Skinner, trying to bring in those wild cards in on cheaper cap hits. I think Reinhart is ultimately just not going to be re-signed by Florida. I think he's going to get a massive $10+ million deal. Somebody is going to give it to him, and I think that team will be the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, he scored 57 goals. He was an absolute monster this year. And I feel like, especially on that right wing, Chicago needs to add something. They need to add some more bulk. They need to add at least somebody that can bring in some goal scoring and bring in some consistency there. It doesn't have to be Sam Reinhart, but I think out of all the big free agents, I think Reinhart makes the most sense for the Blackhawks long term. He's still pretty young, only turning 29 in November. He could still fit that game plan and still be a leader now with a Stanley Cup ring that Chicago could use. Next up, going on to Jake Guentzel, another top forward and winger in this free agency crop, and we heard that he was as good as gone a couple weeks ago from Carolina, but now we've heard that they've kind of been back in on the race, and I think this all depends on Detroit. I could absolutely see Detroit being a team in on Guentzel, trying to get it done, but if they do end up signing Stamkos instead, which might fit better as a right wing there, then I could see Guentzel honestly staying in Carolina. We've heard they've had discussions, they've had contract talks, and there is a situation here where I think he resigns in Carolina. To me, I think it's the best for both sides. Guentzel was brilliant there with the Canes in the regular season and in the playoffs. I think they need his goal scoring. They need his opportunistic style, and that's what they need more of on that top six. I think for both sides, they need to get a deal done here, and I really do hope that Guentzel stays in Carolina because I think that's best for everyone. Next up, we go on to Elias Lindholm, one of the more fascinating players, I think, especially on what he gets in this free agency crop. He's somebody that had a brutal year with both Calgary and Vancouver, and he's somebody that I really don't know the value of right now. It seems like he wants to get this mega long-term deal, which I say to that, I don't know why. He hasn't proved himself to be on that level, at least since Gaudreau and Tkachuk have left Calgary, but I do think there is going to be one team out there that does give him that chance, and that's going to be the Boston Bruins. We've already heard a ton about how they've been interested in Lindholm, trading for him countless times before, but I think this is the perfect opportunity for the Bruins to actually get him in the end. They're going to be active, I think, this offseason, exchanging salaries, getting things done, but I think Lindholm, as an addition to that center group, brings them some more stability. I mean, even though I'm a little bit lower on him right now compared to especially the Bruins, I think Lindholm would still be a pretty valuable piece there, and the Bruins have been searching for top centermen. If Lindholm's back to his prime years, then you do get that type of guy. Now on to Jonathan Marchessault, who I think is probably one of the more underrated players in this whole free agency period. He's somebody that had a fantastic year with Vegas last year. 42 goals, 69 points, the perfect time for a career year. And at 33 years old, he is going to want to get paid, but I also think he's going to want to still win. And I think a team that could be in the mix to give him both of that is the New York Rangers. They're definitely going to want to add somebody on that right wing. I think it's honestly a broken record at this point. They need to add a top sixer, and to me, I think Marchessault checks a lot of the boxes that the Rangers specifically would want. He's feisty, he brings that Stanley Cup pedigree, he's somebody that has been really underrated for a long time, isn't the biggest player, but plays bigger than he is, and is more than the sum of his parts. And I think for the Rangers, they of course have had players like that before, like Matt Zuccarello too, so they aren't afraid to trade for players like that. Marchessault is somebody that I think, especially in the Rangers system though, would be really fun, and him on the same line with Panarin would be awesome to watch. I think though, in signing Jonathan Marchessault, it leaves the chance for Patrick Kane to sign there a little bit lesser than. There is still the possibility of it happening, but of course, cap space is an issue there. So I think ultimately he would sign somewhere else. And I think that team will be the Carolina Hurricanes. I still think Kane makes a lot of sense for the Canes and what they could use. And on top, of course, of re-signing Jake Guentzel, I think a player like Kane added to that four group, giving him some more offensive punch there, would be wise for the Canes to go after. I don't think he'd be too expensive, but really the main question mark would be term. At 35 years old, the injury past that he's had before, it would be a major risk, but I feel like the Canes are a team that really laughs in the face of injury risks, and even though that's been them in the butt a little bit, I think Kane is somebody they would still be after and still be interested in. Now we're going to go next up to a couple of Toronto Maple Leafs wingers that will hit the open market. First, we got Tyler Bertuzzi, somebody that I love, and even though he had a stake-bitten first half last year, he's somebody that was able to play almost a full season, ended up with 21 goals, 43 points. He's a valuable player with the ruggedness he provides, and I think on that left wing could be really interesting for a lot of teams. The team that makes the most sense to me, though, is actually the LA Kings. They're a little bit thin on the left side, especially if they're going to have Quinton Byfield transitioning as a center going forward, which would, of course, have him as a second-line guy behind Kopitar. They need some added boost on that left side. I think Bertuzzi checks a lot of the boxes that the LA Kings want. Somebody that can bring that physical edge, that goal-scoring punch. And I think as a full-time guy, could absolutely be a top-pairing complementary player. Now we go on to Max Domi, and I actually think these guys are going to be SoCal rivals going forward. I think the Ducks are going to end up signing Domi, and it's for a lot of reasons. I could see him playing on really any line. He could play on the right wing, he could play on the left, he could do whatever you want. Versatility, I think, is the name of the game here. But I think the Ducks are really going to go after, again, that physical edge, the just menace mindset that Max Domi has, I think is something that Pat Verbeek always wants more of. And especially if they were to go for AD at third overall, I think they'd want to prioritize adding some wing depth to that bottom six. Domi, especially as a third line guy, would be practically perfect there. Now on to Teuvo Teravainen, which is one of the harder players I would say on this list to actually get a gauge of the value, what he could get on his contract. He's somebody that has had a couple really interesting years in Carolina recently. He had 65 points back in 2022, then back to an okay season in 2023. This year at 25 goals and 53 points. He's somebody that over the last couple of years has slowly gone his way back to great minutes and good production with Carolina, but he's somebody that will definitely be hitting the open market, and I think will provide some good value as a two-way player, somebody that can be versatile like we talked about with Max Domi. I think the team that will end up signing him though will be the Colorado Avalanche. I mean, with the Avs and the Stars both being mini Finland, I think the Avs are going to be bolstering that side. They love their Finns. I think Teravainen though makes a lot of sense for what Carolina, for what at least Colorado needs on that middle six. Some stability, some leadership, some veteran presence. It's kind of wild to think that Teravainen is only 29 years old, but he fits that window for the Avs, and I think they can make it work pretty easily. And we keep going with some top left wingers here, and next we got Jake DeBrusk, formerly of the Boston Bruins. I really don't see a situation where DeBrusk is able to stay, even though I think he would still be great with Boston long term. He's somebody though that's kind of on the younger side, turning 28 this October, and somebody that of course has had some great playoffs over the past few years. We know what he can do there. The team that makes the most sense to me though is Lou Lamoriello's New York Islanders, especially if we're going to see them shed cap potentially in Anders Lee and Jean-Gabriel Pageau this offseason. I think they're going to want to change up that foregroup a lot. DeBrusk though, as a younger player, brings a lot of what I think Lou wants, and I think that's just a match made in heaven, honestly. Now we go on to Tyler Toffoli, who is somebody that's bounced around pretty much every single NHL team over the past few years, but unfortunately he's going to continue that same trend. I don't think he's going to be staying in Winnipeg. He will be setting somewhere else, but I still think this is somebody as a power play goal scorer that can provide a lot of value in an offensive role. To me, the team that makes a lot of sense too is the Seattle Kraken. I think they're a team that's going to be really changing up that foregroup a lot. We heard that they have interest in Patrick Laine. We could see an Andre Burakovsky trade as well. To me, I think Toffoli will be a part of reshaping that top six. And I think as an opportunistic scorer, somebody on a power play especially, that can boost that quite a bit and really boost the man advantage, I think that's something that Seattle is really looking for. And Toffoli, of course, you can get as a veteran presence, sign cheaper, than you'd have to trade for Patrick Laine. That to me is what I think it ultimately comes down to. And I think Toffoli is a little bit more likely than trading for Laine if you're Seattle. Now going on to one of the last top forwards in the free agency period, at least one of the top forwards that I don't see re-signing, and that is Vladimir Tarasenko, another player that was brought on to Florida this year and had a pretty great stint with them in both the regular season and the playoffs. He's somebody that I think will get some pretty good value out there. I don't think is going to get a massive payday, but somebody, of course, is now a two-time Stanley Cup champion, will, of course, be brought on for some leadership. I think a team that could use that and a team that's looking to make some big changes is the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think they're the team that is primed to add a leader like this, a player that's been there, that's done that. I think they want to add players that have been able to have that experience before, because that's something that Columbus's, especially foregroup, is severely lacking. I think Tarasenko, though, makes a lot of sense for what Columbus needs, what they want, and I think especially with how different they're going to look next year, Tarasenko will be a big part of that. And just for the jokes, let's go to Cory Perry, and where he goes, of course, decides who will lose in the Stanley Cup final next year. So drumroll please, he will sign with the Boston Bruins, because there's no better tradition recently than Boston losing in the Stanley Cup final, and Perry, of course, will continue that on another new team, because that's just how things work. But those were my free agency predictions for 2024. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and of course share with your friends online. If you did enjoy, maybe let me know down below what you guys agree and disagree with, and where you see the top free agents in every position going, and who you see your favorite team landing. I would love to know your thoughts down below. Of course, should have been with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my predictions, talking one playlist for you to binge, and I will see you in the next one. I hope you have a brilliant hockey day, and goodbye.